I didn't find out about the house until last December. It was one of those things they just didn't mention, like it wasn't relevant. Like it was a weather update or something. I'm Noah, 31 now, and I've been renting my old bedroom in my parents' house ever since I moved back home after my startup tanked in 2020. I was supposed to stay for a few months while I got back on my feet. You know how that goes. A few months turned into a year, then another. Rent was always a weird subject. I offered to pitch in right away, but Mom waved it off, said they were just happy to have me back. Then one day, totally unprompted, Dad said, "It'd be good if you started contributing. $1,400 a month sounds fair, yeah?" I didn't argue. I was making good money again freelancing, and I figured it was just fair. So I paid. Every month. On time. For 3 straight years. I didn't complain when my room still had the same peeling paint from high school, or when my car had to be parked on the street because the driveway was reserved for guests. I didn't even complain when my younger brother, Mark, moved back for a bit after his divorce and somehow got to use the guest room with the bathroom attached. Mark's always been the golden boy. Everything he does is just trying his best. Even when he wrecked Dad's car back in college and somehow convinced them it was my fault for never teaching him how to drive stick. That's the kind of dynamic we're working with here. I'm the older brother who could have gone further if he applied himself. He's the little prince who just needs a little help getting on his feet. Anyway, like I said, it was December when I found the mortgage statements. It wasn't like I was snooping or anything. They were sitting in a basket on the kitchen counter, under some mail. I was looking for the thermostat manual because the heater was acting up in my room again, and I wanted to fix it myself instead of hearing Dad lecture me about not touching anything. I opened the folder thinking it was manuals or warranties, and boom, there it was. Monthly mortgage payments addressed to Mark. Same name, same address. Except it wasn't our address. It was a 2-story ranch in a newer neighborhood, about 30 minutes away. A quick Zillow search confirmed the property, $290,000, purchased 2 years ago. That timeline clicked something in my brain, like a file I'd forgotten I even had. 2 years ago was when they got weirdly insistent about me setting up autopay. Just makes things easier, Dad said. Mom nodded like it was nothing. I should have asked right then. I should have just brought it up at the table like a normal person. But I didn't. I let it fester. I started watching them closer. Dad would always check the mail before I could get to it. Mom would accidentally delete messages from the bank that were sent to the family email account we still shared for utilities. And Mark suddenly stopped talking about moving out. He used to joke about needing to find his own space again. Then, nothing. Just silence. One night, I brought it up casually. "So, you planning on getting a place soon?" He just shrugged and said, "Nah, I'm kind of set for now." I kept paying rent. I kept quiet through Christmas. Then, on New Year's Day, after my parents left for a weekend trip, I opened the hall closet, the one they always said was too packed with old boxes to bother with, and found a giant envelope from the bank. Mark's name again. Loan documents. Payment breakdowns. A deposit timeline. But the thing that made me sit down, right there on the carpet, was the automatic transfer receipt from my parents' joint account to the mortgage lender. The exact same amount I'd been paying in rent, down to the dollar. They were using my rent to pay for his house. Let that sink in. I wasn't helping with bills. I wasn't contributing to the household. I was literally paying my brother's mortgage while he played Xbox in the next room and occasionally offered to split a pizza, like he was doing me a favor. I didn't say anything that day. I didn't even slam the closet door. I just stood up, put everything back exactly how I found it, and sat on my bed for a long time. Not thinking, just feeling. You ever have that kind of moment? When your whole body just goes quiet, like it's too stunned to feel the betrayal yet. I made one decision that night. I stopped the autopay. No announcement. No text. Nothing. Just logged into the app, disabled the transfer, and left it alone. 2 weeks later, they showed up at my door. And they were angry. They didn't knock. They just opened the door like it was still their house and walked right in. Mom had that strained smile she used when she was about to say something manipulative but wanted it to sound polite. Dad looked irritated from the jump, pacing like he was working himself up. And Mark? He stayed in the car. I caught a glimpse of him through the blinds, sitting in the passenger seat, staring at his phone like he wasn't involved in any of this. Mom went first. "Noah, honey, your rent didn't go through this month. I'm sure it's just a mix-up, but your father's been worried about the bills." I didn't answer right away. I didn't invite them to sit. I just stood by the kitchen counter, coffee in hand, and said, "It's not a mix-up." Dad's voice shot out like a rubber band. "What's that supposed to mean? You think you can just stop paying rent because you're in a mood?" "I think," I said slowly, "that I'm done funding Mark's mortgage." That was it. No yelling yet. Just a pause. A short, still silence, like the moment when a dropped plate hasn't hit the ground yet. Mom blinked, her smile slipping. "I don't know what you think you found. I saw the transfer receipts. The loan statements. You've been using my rent money to pay for Mark's house for over 2 years. You could have told me. You didn't. That's all I need to know." Dad's face flushed with that familiar mix of disbelief and righteous anger. "So what? You think we owe you a financial breakdown every time we use money? We're your parents. We've supported you your whole life. Now you're nickel-and-diming us because your brother needed help." I stared at him. "I didn't move back in so you could treat me like an ATM for Mark's life upgrade. You told me I was contributing to the household, not that I was bankrolling his free ride." "He's not getting a free ride," Mom said, a little sharper now. "He's rebuilding. He had a divorce, Noah. You wouldn't understand what that does to a person." That hit something deep in me. A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. "Yeah, I wouldn't know anything about rebuilding. Like when I lost my business and slept on a couch for 6 months before crawling back here and paying full rent for my childhood bedroom." "You're being dramatic," Dad muttered. "No," I said, setting the coffee cup down harder than I meant to. "I'm being honest. You didn't ask me to help Mark. You tricked me into doing it." "We didn't trick you," Mom said, though her voice was quieter now. "We just thought it made sense. You were living here. He needed help. We figured it was fair." Fair. That word rang in my ears like a bad echo. Fair. Like it was fair that I worked 2 jobs in college while Mark got a car on his 18th birthday. Like it was fair that when I missed Thanksgiving 1 year for a work deadline, I got a lecture about priorities. But when Mark skipped Christmas, it was he probably just needs space. Like it was fair that every time I asked for something, it was seen as a burden, and every time Mark asked, it was seen as a need. That word, fair, broke something in me. I stepped closer. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm not paying another dime. You want me out? Fine. Give me notice like a real landlord. Otherwise, I'm here. Quiet. Clean. Paid up through last month." Dad clenched his jaw so tight I could hear his teeth grind. "You're not going to guilt us into anything, Noah. You've always had a chip on your shoulder. That's your problem." That's when I knew the conversation was over. Not just this one. All of them. Every argument, every guilt trip, every subtle dig pretending to be parenting. It all felt the same now. Pointless. I didn't say anything else. I just turned, walked into my room, and closed the door behind me. For a few minutes, I could hear them whispering in the living room. Then the front door slammed. Car started. Gone. That night, Mark messaged me. "Mark, dude, you really gonna screw Mom and Dad like that? You know how tight things are right now." Me. "Then maybe you should pay your own mortgage." "Mark, you've always been jealous. Ever since we were kids. This is just sad, man." That's what he sent. And you know what? It didn't even hurt. Not the way it would have a few years ago. Maybe because for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to defend myself. I didn't need to justify anything. I didn't reply, but that wasn't the end of it. 2 days later, I came home to find my key no longer worked in the front door. Just a deadbolt that refused to turn, like it was personally judging me. I knocked. No answer. Tried calling both my parents. Straight to voicemail. I had work the next morning and nowhere to sleep. I ended up crashing at my friend Jordan's apartment. We hadn't talked much lately, but when I explained, or tried to, he just said, "Dude, stay as long as you need." Seriously. And that simple act of kindness hit harder than I expected. The next morning, my phone had 17 texts from my mom. "We didn't mean to upset you. It was just a misunderstanding. Your father is really hurt. You can't just stop communicating. This behavior is concerning, Noah. We had no choice but to change the locks. You were acting irrationally. You're still welcome to come talk when you're ready to be reasonable." That last one made me laugh out loud. I wasn't locked out for safety reasons. I was locked out because I stopped playing along. Because I stopped being the dependable son who always cleaned up their messes. Because I said no. I took a deep breath and realized something I hadn't let myself admit before. I didn't want to go back. Not to that house. Not to that version of myself. I didn't want to explain why I was hurt. I didn't want to plead for understanding or negotiate for basic respect. But I also knew this wasn't over. They had made the first move. Now it was my turn. I didn't touch my phone for the rest of the day. After that string of texts, something in me just shut down. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. It was like I'd unplugged from a system I didn't even realize I'd been powering. The guilt, the shame, the constant pressure to prove I wasn't the difficult one, it was gone. Just quiet. I sat on Jordan's couch that night, a hoodie pulled over my head, pretending to watch some half-baked cooking competition show he had on. But really, I was staring through the screen, trying to figure out what came next. The next few days were weirdly calm, almost suspiciously so. My parents stopped messaging, like they'd moved into the let him come crawling back phase. Mark unfriended me on everything, Facebook, Instagram, even Venmo. Like I was going to request money or something. I kept my head down, worked on my freelance projects from Jordan's tiny kitchen table, and told myself this was temporary. But temporary turned into a week. Then two. Jordan never said a word about it. Didn't ask how long I planned to stay. Didn't make me feel like a burden. But I felt it anyway. The way I left my bag tucked against the wall, the way I tiptoed when I got up early to make coffee, the way I made sure to leave the bathroom cleaner than I found it every time. I'd gotten good at shrinking myself. One morning, I woke up before sunrise and sat on the apartment balcony, sipping cold coffee, and realized I hadn't thought about my old room once. Not the posters I'd left on the wall. Not the childhood photos still framed in the hallway. Nothing. It didn't feel like home anymore. It hadn't for a long time. That's when I decided I wasn't going back. I opened a new browser tab and started looking for sublets. It took me 4 days and about 20 sketchy Craigslist posts, but I eventually found a studio about 15 minutes away. Small, sure. One of those places where you can touch the fridge and the bed at the same time, but it had a window, working heat, and most importantly, a lock that only I had the key to. I moved in with 2 duffel bags, a folding table, and the same chair I'd used through college. For the first few nights, I slept on a yoga mat with a hoodie for a pillow. It was pathetic, but it was mine. Work picked up slowly. I'd always had steady clients in the background. A couple of startups I did web design for, one retail chain that always needed quick graphics for their seasonal sales. But now, I started pushing harder. Rebuilt my portfolio. Reached out to old contacts. Signed up for a few freelance platforms, even though I hated how competitive they were. One night, I stayed up till 3 a.m. submitting bids, writing pitches like cover letters, tweaking my rates. It paid off. By the end of the month, I had 5 new clients. One of them turned into a retainer gig that covered half my rent. I bought a used mattress off Facebook Marketplace and finally stopped waking up with a sore back. Still, none of this was glamorous. I lived on instant noodles and rice with frozen vegetables. My only furniture was a wobbly secondhand table and a lamp I found next to a dumpster. But I was free. No one was in the next room sighing loudly because I hadn't unloaded the dishwasher. No one was accidentally forgetting to tell me about family dinners until an hour before. No one was using me to pay off someone else's life. I started running again. Nothing serious, just laps around the park across the street. But it helped. Cleared my head. Burned off the anxious energy that always hit late at night. There was something about the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement, the sound of my breath in the early morning, that felt honest. Like I was building something, even if it was just endurance. Jordan stopped by once with pizza and a folding chair. "You're a real grown-up now," he joked, setting the chair down like it was some kind of housewarming gift. "Got your own place. Paying rent that doesn't secretly fund a sibling's mortgage. Look at you." I laughed, but there was a tightness in my chest. Part of me still carried the weight of what happened. The way they looked at me, like I was the one who broke something. Like I'd betrayed them. A week later, I found out they'd been telling the extended family I had moved out in a fit and refused to speak to them since. One cousin texted me, confused, "Did you really just stop paying rent out of nowhere?" Another sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post my mom had made. Something vague about sacrificing for your kids only to be left behind when they don't get their way. I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to play the game anymore. Let them twist the narrative. Let them act like victims. I didn't know anyone an explanation. I didn't know anyone anything. Still, the silence hurt. One night, I got an email from a former client who'd passed my name along to a mid-sized marketing firm looking for a full-time designer. I'd done one-off work for them before, nothing fancy, just social media graphics and banner ads. But apparently someone there remembered me. The email said they were expanding and wanted someone with experience who could hit the ground running. The pay wasn't amazing, but it came with health insurance. I stared at the email for a long time before replying. My first instinct was to say no. I wasn't a full-time guy. I liked my freedom, my weird hours, my creative control. But then I thought about that cold yoga mat. About the way Jordan still paid the Netflix bill even though I'd been using his account for months. About the silence from my parents. About how tired I was of just surviving. I sent my portfolio. A week later, I had the job. And just like that, something shifted. I wasn't just scraping by anymore. I was building again. Rebuilding. Rewriting. I furnished the studio, slowly, but with care. A cheap IKEA couch. A rug that looked more expensive than it was. Framed prints from local artists I found at a street fair. It started to feel real. Like I existed in my own story for once. Around that time, I started therapy. I didn't tell anyone. Just walked into a clinic one day and asked if they had any openings. The first few sessions were awkward. I didn't know how to explain the mess in my head without sounding petty or ungrateful. But eventually, I found the words. And once I did, they came pouring out. All the years of trying to earn affection by being useful. All the quiet compromises. The moments where I told myself I was being dramatic when I felt left out, overlooked, dismissed. The therapist didn't judge. She just listened. And she gave me language for things I didn't know how to name. Boundaries. Enmeshment. Conditional love. I started writing again, too. Not professionally. Just for me. Little scenes. Fragments of dialogue. Reflections. At first, it felt indulgent. Like I was wasting time. But soon it became a ritual. A way to hear myself think. A way to figure out what I actually wanted. Not what my parents expected, not what Mark needed, but what I needed. The truth is, I didn't just lose a place to live when they locked me out. I lost a version of myself. The obedient son, the problem solver. The one who quietly took on everyone else's stress. And while it hurt, while it cracked something deep in me, it also gave me permission to be someone new. Someone whole. Someone free. And just when I thought I was finally past it all, just when I felt the weight starting to lift, I got a letter in the mail. It wasn't from my parents. It was from a lawyer. And the return address? Mark's. I must have stared at the envelope for a full 5 minutes before opening it. My name was typed cleanly on the front, not handwritten. No return label, just the pre-printed address from some midtown law office I didn't recognize, but the tiny line beneath it said enough. Mark E. Callahan, client. The moment I saw it, my stomach flipped. Not because I was scared, but because I was angry. Not the loud, shout-in-the-street kind. The quiet kind. The kind that starts like a knot behind your ribs and just tightens until you have to do something about it. The letter was short. To Mr. Noah Callahan. This letter serves as formal notice of our client's intent to pursue financial restitution related to unpaid rent, damages to shared property, and disruption of family agreements. Our office has been authorized to initiate legal proceedings unless repayment is arranged within 30 calendar days. A detailed accounting of owed funds is enclosed. I flipped to the second page. That's when I laughed. Out loud. Alone in my apartment. It was so ridiculous I actually laughed. According to the breakdown, I owed them over $15,000, back rent, missed contributions, and even a charge for unauthorized access to confidential family financial documents. Like they weren't the ones laundering my rent payments through my brother's mortgage. For a moment, I wondered if this was just a scare tactic. Maybe my parents put Mark up to it, thinking I'd cave and make things right. But the language was too precise, too smug. I could hear Mark's voice in it, that same fake serious tone he used whenever he played devil's advocate in family arguments. The kind of guy who said, well, technically you owe me, even when the conversation was about borrowing a charger. But this wasn't just him being petty. This was a mistake. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't powerless anymore. Not even close. The next day, I called a lawyer. His name was Ron Patel, a guy I'd met through a marketing project for a startup last year. He wasn't flashy, but he had this calm, surgical way of speaking that made you feel like every word had already been vetted and approved by 5 smarter people. I emailed him the letter, and within an hour he called me back. I've seen these, he said. It's saber-rattling. Nothing enforceable, but they're trying to push you into paying out of fear. Classic family leverage tactic. Can they actually sue me? I asked. Anyone can sue you. Doesn't mean they'll win. But if they do file, you'll want to be ready. I hesitated. What would being ready look like? And that was the moment it started. Over the next week, Ron walked me through every step: how to document payments, pull bank statements, gather digital records. I dug into my email inbox, exporting old receipts from my automatic rent payments. Found the messages from my mom confirming the $1,400 monthly amount. Even found a text where Dad said, "Appreciate you covering this while Mark gets back on his feet." Gold. But the best part? The receipts from the bank. Remember those mortgage documents I found? I hadn't taken pictures at the time, but I remembered the bank name. So I requested a transaction history from my own bank and flagged every single payment to my parents. Then I overlaid that timeline against the public mortgage data I pulled from the county clerk's website. Every single month I paid rent, they paid his mortgage, same amount, give or take. It wasn't proof of fraud, not exactly, but it was enough to prove that they had misrepresented our agreement. I wasn't paying to live at home. I was unknowingly subsidizing my brother's personal property. Ron's tone changed after that. "We're not just going to block their claim," he said. "We're going to counter." I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even Jordan. I needed it to be quiet, controlled, clean. The first thing I did was freeze out every contact line my parents had to me, blocked their numbers, restricted them on socials, changed my email. I knew how they operated. If I let them back in, they'd send a flood of guilt and emotional noise to try and throw me off. I needed clarity. I needed distance. Then I got methodical. Ron helped me draft a formal response, not just denying the claim, but itemizing the support I'd provided them over the years. Rent payments, utility coverage, even a few Venmo transfers from when Mom forgot her purse and asked me to spot dinner. I'd been the bank of Noah for too long, and now I had receipts. We sent the letter directly to Mark's lawyer. Certified mail. No threats. No emotional language. Just facts. And then, I waited. While that was happening, I started thinking about what came next. Revenge wasn't just about retaliation. Not for me. It wasn't enough to win. I wanted them to see me win. I wanted them to understand that the boy who lived in the shadow of their favoritism, the difficult son who never quite fit, had outgrown their control. So I made a list. At the top of it, my credit score. Turns out it was better than I expected. I'd been so focused on survival that I hadn't noticed how clean I'd kept my finances. No major debts. No missed payments. And with my new full-time job, I qualified for a low-interest business credit line. That opened doors. I filed for an LLC under a new name, NoCal Creative. A little nod to my initials. The idea was simple. Take my freelance work and legitimize it. Build a portfolio strong enough to pitch bigger clients. Maybe even open a small office someday. I wasn't rushing it, but I wanted the option. I wanted to know I was building something they couldn't touch. Around that time, I started getting messages from extended family. My aunt in Vermont, a cousin in Philly, all variations of the same thing. "Hey, your mom's been saying you're going through something. Hope you're okay." Mark mentioned some legal mix-up but didn't explain. "Just checking in. Is everything all right?" I didn't reply to any of them, but I did something better. I started posting. Nothing dramatic. No call-outs. Just wins. A photo of my new studio with the caption, "Blank space, big dreams." A screenshot of my first business invoice, one step at a time. A picture of me and Jordan at a cheap diner, smiling over pancakes, grateful for real friends. The likes poured in. Comments from people I hadn't talked to in years. And you better believe my parents saw every single post. They'd never unfollowed me. 3 weeks after we sent the counter letter, Ron called me. "They're backing down." I blinked. "That's it." "Not quite," he said. "They want to schedule a mediation. No court. No press. Just a quiet conversation to resolve misunderstandings." I almost declined. But then I saw the opportunity. Mediation meant a neutral third party. It meant the chance to say everything I'd never been allowed to say, on the record, while they squirmed under someone else's scrutiny. And more importantly, it meant I could make them come to me. I told Ron to schedule it. Then I rented a suit. The day before the mediation, I went through every document one more time. Organized everything into a neat binder. Color-coded. Labeled. Then I added one more thing to the front pocket. A photo of me at 14 years old, holding a school award while my parents stood behind Mark, congratulating him for making the soccer team. A reminder, not just of what they did, but of who I used to be, and why I wasn't going to be him anymore. The morning of the meeting, I showed up 10 minutes early. Not out of anxiety, out of control. I wanted to be the one who waited. They arrived late. Mom was in pearls. Dad looked tired. Mark didn't even dress up, just khakis and a smug expression like this whole thing was beneath him. The mediator was a soft-spoken woman named Linda, who welcomed everyone with a practiced smile and asked us to sit. Then she turned to me. Noah, would you like to begin? I opened the binder, and as I started to speak, I felt something settle in my chest. Not vengeance. Power. And I hadn't even shown them the last page yet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse, accuse, or grandstand. I just told the truth. Page by page. I laid out the timeline of my rent payments, the text messages from my parents, the mortgage documents, the bank transfers, the evidence that every dollar I paid for my room had been diverted straight into Mark's house fund. I spoke clearly, professionally. I had dates, names, emails, and when they tried to interrupt, Mom with her watery eyes, Dad with his grumbling, Mark with a snort, the mediator gently reminded them they'd have their chance to speak. Linda turned to them after I finished. Do you dispute any of this? Mom blinked rapidly. We just thought we were helping both our sons. Noah was staying in our home, and Mark had just gone through a divorce. Did you tell Noah his rent money was being used to pay Mark's mortgage? She didn't answer. Dad stepped in. It was all in the family. We didn't think it mattered. Linda nodded slowly. That's not how financial agreements work. Transparency is key. What you've described could constitute a form of misrepresentation. Mark finally spoke. Okay, but what exactly does he want? Money? An apology? I didn't even look at him when I responded. I want acknowledgement. I want this on record, what you did, and how you did it. And I want assurance that no further claims will be made against me. Ron leaned forward. We're also submitting a formal request for restitution of $3,800, the final 3 months Noah paid rent after discovering the mortgage redirection. Additionally, we'll be requesting a signed mutual release of any financial obligation between Noah and your clients. The mediator nodded again. That seems fair and proportionate given the documentation. That's when Mark cracked. This is a joke. You think you're going to humiliate us over $3,000? You think this makes you better than everyone else? I turned to him, finally, met his eyes. No, I think it makes me free. There it was, that flicker. Just for a second. The realization that I wasn't playing the role anymore. I wasn't chasing approval or defending myself. I wasn't his older brother, the family buffer. I was done. The agreement was drafted and signed that afternoon. They didn't look at me as they signed it. I didn't expect them to. Ron handled the payment transfer. I left the meeting with a copy of the release, a cashier's check for $3,800, and a silence so loud it almost rang. A week later, I got a call from Aunt Denise. She never took sides. She wasn't the gossiping type. But she'd heard what happened, not from them, but from my cousin, who had seen one of my posts and reached out. I'm proud of you, she said. I know it probably feels messy, but you did the right thing. I thanked her. Then I blocked every single family member still connected to my parents. Not out of spite, just to stop the back-channel commentary. I didn't need updates. I didn't want status reports. The door was closed. Mark didn't last long in the house. 3 months after the mediation, I got a Google alert I'd set up during the legal process. A foreclosure notice had been filed for the property. Missed payments. Delinquent taxes. I guess once I stopped funding his lifestyle, the bills caught up. I didn't cheer. I didn't celebrate. But I did screenshot the notice, print it out, and slide it into the back of my binder, right behind the copy of the signed release. Closure, in black and white. As for my parents, I heard through the grapevine they were downsizing. They sold their house, the one I grew up in, the one I paid rent to live in, and moved into a condo 2 towns over. Smaller place, fewer neighbors, less chatter. They tried to reach out one last time. It was a letter this time, handwritten by Mom. She said they missed me, that no family is perfect, and that they hoped I could see past everything and come home for the holidays. No mention of what they did. No apology. Just the usual dance of guilt dressed up as sentiment. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. By the end of the year, NoCal Creative had 3 contractors working under it. We landed our first corporate campaign. Nothing massive, but enough to get noticed. I hired a part-time project manager. Started working out of a shared workspace downtown instead of my apartment. I still lived in the studio, though. It reminded me where I started. One evening, I stood in the middle of the room with a glass of cheap red wine, looking around. The prints on the walls, the lamp Jordan gave me, the rug, the folding chair that had somehow never broken. I thought about that first night sleeping on the floor, angry and humiliated. And I smiled, because I wasn't angry anymore. They took a lot from me. Time, trust, a sense of safety, but they gave me something too. A line I would never let anyone cross again. I posted one final photo to social media that December. Just me, standing on the balcony of the co-working space, the city skyline behind me. I was in a blazer, not for a meeting, just because I liked how it felt. The caption was simple. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's proof you finally know your worth. And with that, I turned off notifications. For good.